Now the second option for setting up the camera is to have the camera start following the character when the character is at the edge of the screen. And let me just show you what I mean by that. So I've set up a new scene, and this has got new camera control on it. You can see that when the character is moving at the edge of the screen, the camera starts scrolling with it. Right, so that's what we're going to do. So let's take a quick look at how this state is set up for the camera to follow the player the way we want it. First, we have our init scene where we go and find the player object and put it in a variable so we can use it later on. Next, we want to check which direction this character is moving. Now, there are a few different ways you can do it. You can check and see if the left key or the right arrow key is being pressed, or you can do what we're doing here where we're checking the velocity on the x-axis to see if it's a positive number or a negative number. So that would let us know that which direction this character is moving, left or right. Now the reason why I wanted to go with I wanted to check the velocity instead of the key press is because let's say down the line we have enemies or other things going on in the game. There might be situations where the character might be moving, but there's no key being pressed, right? So let's say if an enemy attacks the player and then the character sort of gets knocked back a few units, then even though the player is not pressing any keys, the character might still be moving, and we want the camera to be able to know that movement as well. So here in this state, we're simply getting the velocity of the player object, put it in a variable, player velocity x, and we're going to check the sign of this float using the float sign test. And if it's positive, we're going to go to the next state, which is moving right state. So this is what we will do if the character is moving that direction. And obviously if the velocity is negative, that means the character is moving towards the left, and we're going to go to a different state. Okay, let's say if the player is moving right, so we're going to go to this state here, and from here all we want to do is detecting if the player is touching the edge of the screen, and we're going to define how big of a margin we want to leave for the player to move. Right, so here the first thing we do is we get the position of the player, put it in the player pos x variable, and then we want to use this action called world to screen point, which basically translates the world position of the player to the screen position. Now if you don't remember what the differences are, the screen position is the position an object has on the screen, so it's only got the x axis and the y axis here. The world position, however, on the other hand, is the position of the object in the world space, which in this case is the transform position here. Actually, in any case, it's the transform position in the engine, the 3D engine. So everything in the world has a 3D position, but on the screen it's only got two axes, right? So what these actions, so in the action browser you can actually find a bunch of actions that deals with translating between the screen space and the world space. So here what we want to do is we want to translate, we want to convert the screen, the world space, the world x, which is what we got from the previous action, to its corresponding screen space. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want this to work regardless of the screen size. So let's say I have the screen size here is 1024 by 768. When I change that aspect ratio, you can see that the game is going to have a different look to it. So if I use the world space for detecting the edge, it might not give me the result that I wanted when the screen is on a different device. Now we want to make sure that normalize is checked. So that means when this is checked, then the coordinate for the axis are going to be between 0 and 1, which is very handy because in the next action we're going to compare the screen space, the screen position to 0.8, which is basically saying we're going to have 20% of margin here, and when the character goes up to this 20%, this 80% position, 0.8, so this is 0, this is 1 on the x-axis, then we're going to start following the character, right? So that's what that's doing here. We compare the screen position on the x-axis, and if it's greater than 0.8, if the character is moving further than 80% of this line here, then we're going to go to the at edge transition, and it's going to go to the next state. Okay, so let me just go through the rest of the actions here, and then finally in the same action we want to see if the player has started moving the other direction, right? Because if that happens, we want to move to this state down here. So again, we're going to get the velocity and then check the sign of it. If it's negative, all of a sudden we're going to be in here. Now the moving left state and the moving right state, they're actually pretty much identical except for a few tweaks. For example, if we go to the moving left state, everything up here is the same. We're getting the position of the player's X position, and we're converting it to screen space, screen point. And from here, we're comparing the player position, the player's screen position to 0.2, and if it's smaller than that, we're going to send the player to the next state. And then finally, after that, again, we're going to check the velocity and see if it has become positive. If that's the case, we're going to go back to moving right. So in these two states, we determine if the player is at either side of the screen, and if the character is at the edge of the screen, we go to the next step, which is go from at edge to these two states. And if you pay attention, you can see that when this state is finished, it goes to the next one, and then the next one, when it's done, goes back here. So there is a small loop here that I've set up to track the position and set the position of the camera. So track the position of the player and set the position of the camera. And what I'm essentially doing is I'm going to find how much the character has moved in one frame, and I'm going to translate. I'm going to move the camera by the same amount, and until we test the velocity again and see if it has changed direction. So we'll keep doing that, find the difference between the position difference between the two frames, and move the camera until the character is moving in the other direction. So as you can see, we're doing the get position, get velocity again, and then checking the sign. And if the character is moving in the other direction, then we're going to send it back to our very first state to decide, well, which direction should we go into. Right, so it's the same thing down here, but we're checking for the opposite signs, basically. When I say signs, the signs for the velocity. So that's the quick overview of what we're going to do. And let's go back to the scene we're working on and start creating this state.